Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the Pick and Post Show, a brand new content idea that I came up with literally 3 days ago, because that's just how I apparently roll. We're going to be talking all things the major, in particular the Challenger stage, in particular the Pick'em Challenge, of course. I've got everyone's picks here. We're going to go through them all, discuss some random things, and talk about some Counter-Strike. I'm the EternalJay. I'm joined by my panel of experts. Below me, the ladies' man, Skriv himself, the irresistible beard of esports. He's confused at that one, mate. You're not the ladies' man, no?
You'll take it?
Awesome.
Something like that. Yeah, sure. Apparently I am. So,
well, yeah. The ladies' man, Skriv, the lanky man, Retro, off to my left-hand side, sitting there with his green screen pro background, and the non-pro background, of course, in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Trav, the trivia man, actually, in that case. You've been posting a lot about this major on Twitter.
Yeah, I've been honestly really enjoying it. To be honest, my Twitter is like my main source of talking to people about it all. So like that's why I kind of do it really. So why not?
I mean, to be fair, it is kind of everyone's sort of yeah. I don't know. So yeah, Twitter, Trav, all that good stuff. We're doing the major, of course. It's the day off between Challengers and Legends, so we're all getting our pick'ems in. We've all assessed our positions in the picks overall. I kind of wanted to ask you boys, how do we fare? How do we do this time around?
Well, yeah, mine were a little close. I'm not gonna lie to you. I only got the 5 out of 9. You know, the old Renegades pulling through. It was a little for a minute there. Should I have gone IHC when they were like playing each other? So yeah, I was pretty close actually. I think I did quite well last major, but this one we kind of talked about it a little bit, and I think it's a running theme with everyone that's involved and into the pick'ems and that. But it's been quite a challenge, I think, to pick through. And you know, the legend stage is only harder, it seems. So but yeah, I got through just about.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in general we kind of all did okay. Like the scores were actually pretty respectable, like within that 5 to 7 range. So we all passed at the very least. Unlike Dweg, who got 4, and I'm gonna BM him to fuck.
No.
I'm gonna BM him to fuck in this. I'm gonna BM him to fuck in this whole broadcast, because I did ask him if he wanted to come on, and he was like, "No, I'd rather do a demo review stream." So right now he's streaming over on his channel, and all I want to do is just beat him up and beat him on the viewers and BM him throughout the course of this show. So let's take you through exactly how the Challenger stage went down. I think I'm the only person who didn't actually show the group whose picks had actually had gone down, so I wanted to demonstrate that is actually incorrect. I have fucked this up already. That is my legend stage. Oh shit.
Happens to the best of us.
Here we go. This is what I said, right? I came up with this idea about like 3 days ago, and I knew that this was going to be already a shit show from the word go. So let me see if I can do this properly this time. Yep, that is also the wrong scene. Oh no, I've messed it up. Retro, I need your production help, brother. Help me.
Just click buttons, really, innit?
Click buttons.
Click buttons in it, bruv. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe just like take the camera and like turn it around, point it at your screen, and.
Okay,
yeah,
all right. Take 3. My Challenger stage. Here we go. There we are. Excellent. That's better. All right. So, I actually scored the best out of all of us here. I got 7 out of 9. My only 2 mess ups were Eternal Fire going through and Astralis going 3-0. So for me, I am actually really impressed, because I think that's one of the better ones I've had so far in this one. So I'm real stoked, boys. I really am.
No, honestly, that's really good. Like, I really like the Astralis pick as well, because I know it failed miserably, but that's what that 3-0 spot's for, right? Like, it's for a team that you think could easily beat everyone, but could also not make it, at least for me anyway. So yeah, that's not bad. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, that was generally the idea, right? Like the idea of someone who couldn't make it, but could have the potential to go 3-0. I was saying on Twitter that I think Vitality had the better chances, thinking back in retrospect. And that's not just because they managed to fucking go 3-0 at the end. I genuinely mean that. So, there's that. Obviously, Retro, your pick'ems were pretty close as well. 6 out of 9 total. Yeah. You missed out on your 3-0 and 0-3. The 0-3 result, we're going to talk about that in a bit more detail as the show goes on. But you actually correctly predicted BNE, which I didn't think that they would do that well at all.
I think it was a bit nerving, right? The road that they had through the Challenger stage, I mean, I had a lot of people come at me and say, oh, they had the easy route, you know, basically losing to the good teams and drawing the worser teams in the stage, I was actually very surprised to see how well they played individually. I think heading into this major, I'm always a big B&E fan anyway, so it would be rude of me not to put them to go through to the Legends stage. The Astralis pick, I think I expected them to go through. I think for you, Jay, obviously you putting them 3-0, you said it right. They could have easily went 3-0, but at the same time, the backbone is they should be qualifying, and the fact that they didn't is very, very surprising. The Ents going 3-1, I mean, guessing to play against G2, it was always going to be a difficult game, but I thought if there would be any team there with the recent form that Ents had, number 3 in the world, I thought they'd make it. So maybe a little surprising that G2 had them beat, but it happens, right? So I'm not too fussed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I could have seen an easy opportunity for Ents to go 3-0, to be fair. So I can't disrespect any of these particular picks. Trav, I can disrespect at least one of your picks because you did opt to go with Forza at the pick'em stage, and I'm not certain why you've decided on that, but you have got your 5 with Ents, Vitality, G2, Liquid, and the Outsiders, and also a very risky pick in the 3-0 for B&E as well, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, again, I sort of considered that a throwaway, just to think, okay, well, there's a chance. No, their draw wasn't too bad, and that's the same reason. I'll just say quickly, also, my IHC, I bottled that entirely. I should have 100% put Renegades, but I just thought I couldn't forgive myself if I left, if I left IHC out of 0-3, and then they actually did go 0-3 in the end. So yeah, I shouldn't have put them in there, honestly, but there we are. And with Forza, I don't know, like, the thing is, I saw the draw, like I did all the predictions with the pick and prediction website, and saw they had a nice early start, and they're good in the BO1s. I thought they had a chance to go 2-0. They did go 2-0, but then just the BO3, the BO3s really caught them out. It's a shame that you could just tell the experience wasn't there for them, because against Imperial, it was more evident than ever before. I really like the Forza team. Like, I had a chance to interview Jerry after a match about a month or 2 ago, and he spoke about. I asked him about the form of Shalfie and how good Shalfie has been, and he said, "Oh, Shalfie before, he's early on in his career, he was a little bit nervous against playing the bigger names, and then recently he's managed to push through that and has really, been the star player for the team, and I'm really impressed with him." And Jerry gave I was so sort of impressed and empowered by what Jerry said to me. I thought, okay, well, Forza, I've been impressed with them. I think they have a shot. But in the end, lack of experience, I think, has really caught up with them. As for Astralis, we've been over that.
We're going to go over that in more detail, so definitely hold out on that topic for a bit more.
Let's wait for that one.
Look, to be honest, Forza is not the most team. It's not the team I think you can sort of like BM the most when it comes to the overall picks and what teams and what we've all decided to go with. Skriv, though, mate, there's a big star on this pick'em sheet that I have to sort of question your logic about here. I mean, you got 5 out of 9. So you'd managed to just scrape by, but surely during that fucking Renegade series, considering how poorly fucking Complexity did, you must have been shitting yourself.
Yeah, a little bit, and I was kind of like, watching them against IHT and all that kind of stuff as well. I really needed Renegades to not deliver, as it were. So, and they kind of did. So that was okay. But yeah, I think I do. This is the issue, right? And last time out, it was maybe okay to sort of vote with my heart a little bit and be like, oh, I really like this team, so I'm gonna kind of manifest them to get through or whatever. But before, there was kind of your G2s and your phases and stuff in the challenger stage, which is like they should be getting through, right? There's not really too much of a question behind that. So I can take some of these poor run of forms, but they should be able to turn it around because it's the major and they've got all this experience. And I think I did a little bit too much. I'm, to be fair, in retrospect, it's like Forza, BNE, who did make it through, but nearly didn't, and Complexity are maybe a little bit too wacky. I'll be real. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't know many people that had a lot of faith in Complexity, to be fair. I'm not certain, again, the logic behind it per se, but look, you did get your 5 points.
There isn't any.
That really is the bottom line here. We all got our 5 points for this one, at the very least. So we all have the achievement. Now we're taking that first step alongside the diamond sort of coin and trying to make our way up to that whole sort of shenanigan thing. But there were some common threads I noticed in the pick'ems, and I kind of wanted to sort of like touch on that a little bit. Obviously, we've dipped into the Astralis thing quite a lot over the course of seeing how all four of us decided to look at Astralis and we thought, listen, this legendary name, surely it must do something good, right? But didn't happen, boys. Does anyone have any sort of like thoughts as to why Astralis bottled it this time?
One word.
Yes, I know the word.
Go on. Go on.
It's got to be Zipex, mate.
Yeah.
I was glad because I didn't want to be the guy to BM a legend, but fuck me, like what a tournament he didn't have, essentially. Like I mean, look, it's kind of been like the writing on the wall for a while now because Astralis have sort of just been on the downward trajectory, right? They've not had a good time, it felt to me, ever since the changes were sort of forced upon them. And as a result, I'm sort of looking at this team and looking back in retrospect, again, we all sort of hoped coming into this stage that we would have a good Astralis, but I think looking back in retrospect now, we can sort of understand, connecting the dots as to why things have worked out this way.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? Because you look at this team and maybe last major or whatever where they kind of did better, you sort of think, well, they're still sort of working things out, right? Not quite sure where the roster, and it seems like it's a little bit dead and all this kind of stuff. And now they've had this team for a while, and it seems like certain parts, like your Blame F and your config, look really good. Glaive still seems to be calling okay. But there's other aspects, what do you do about the AWPin? Farley's kind of, solid, but maybe not quite the level that they need, or of course not the device level. And then Zipex is just doesn't seem motivated, really. I don't know that it's not that he doesn't care and he's just not playing or whatever, but it does kind of get to a point where tougher games, bigger games, he's not putting his heart and soul into all of it by the looks of things, and he's just sort of plodding along and hoping that someone else will do the heavy lifting for him, which, not for want of trying, our guy Benjamin did his best there in that final series, but it just wasn't enough. So it is really disappointing. I think there's a little bit of like stuff in the team, a little bit of the management side as well, maybe, not quite picking the best pieces. And then also, it's a struggle because AWPing wise is sort of their next big issue behind Zipex. And where do you go, really? There's not too many options if they want to remain full Danish.
Yeah, and I mean that's sort of like one of the things that I saw a bit of a common trend online is the idea of going international, because like it's not just Zip that's been the that's been sort of like a problem for them. Actually, if I wanted to just bring up the stats page very quickly for how things have worked out for Astralis in this tournament, like the context is just not great at all. These guys have all sort of had a little bit of a blunder. Blame F is the one guy you can sort of give credit to, and of course Glaive has an exception because he's the IGL. But you think about just like the numbers and the fact that it's all red across most of the board, and you have to start thinking, is international the right sort of way for Astralis?
I think so, honestly. I mean, like, your AWPer on a team like Astralis, which is, set up, I'm sure Glaive, sets up your AWPer to do a lot of the heavy lifting, you absolutely should have more than a 1.0 rating. Like, there's no way you can. And we all said, when they picked up Farley, it was like, okay, yeah, this is a good pickup. This is probably the perfect Danish AWPer, maybe the only one choice, but it's the perfect one you could do. You could argue, Nika does from Copenhagen Flames as well, but like, I think Farley was the obvious one, and he hasn't really, had those hard carry moments, which the AWPer can and should do. On a team like Astralis, like Device used to. I mean, I know no one's like Device, but it's still. And yeah, Zipex, it's just painful to look at. Like, the fact that he was signed on the contract for so long as well just was so confusing to me. I can understand why they kept him, because is it the roster rules? They needed 3 or something, so they didn't have to go through the open qualifiers. Was that right? So, I mean, that's the only reason why they would have done that. There was no performances beforehand which gave me any hope for him. I'm not saying this as a biased person, but like, I don't really have a huge love for Astralis or a huge hate for Astralis. It's just, it's not good, and I really need to see him moved on. Really, that's the only way Astralis move forward.
Yeah, I was gonna say something needs to change in that roster, and Zip's continual performance to be horrific has just been nothing but the worst.
He's in different roles, I think, as well, isn't he?
Yeah, I think that overall, when you look at Zip as a player, his last 4 matches on average, he went like 0.7. you know, in the 5 most recent matches that he'd played. And Astralis as a whole won 2 maps in the entire event. One off of MIBR, a 16-13, and a 16-2 over IHC. Astralis should be beating IHC with their eyes closed. So the 16-2 is respectable. But the fact that you lose 13 rounds to MIBR, who they themselves, I mean, you know, have had some fairly decent results, but you'd expect a lot more from Astralis. You'd expect that maybe like a single-digit scoreline. And then, you know, a 16-6 loss to Spirit on Ancient, a 16-8 loss to Vitality and a BO1. It's painful. It's really painful to see. And for me, as I think we're all agreeing, that roster needs change. And I would say the Danish core at this point, I would say it's got to go out the window. I mean, obviously, Valda from OG is now free to do what he wants. And maybe if they do stick to the roots of a Danish-only roster, then that would be the pickup. But again, it's kind of like, I don't know, is that enough? And it really has been the Blame F show this event, and I'm hoping we can get someone with more firepower. And, you know, with Lollipop being a free agent as well, is it time to see him with a call-up or something like that? I think there's a lot of options for Astralis. It's about which route they take, and I really hope they take the European route to get back to where they are, because I think the Danish roster now, I think it's had its time, but it needs to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a ton of opportunities in the free agency market to sort of like pull new players in, and I wonder if any one of those individual pickups will be good enough to give Astralis the boost that they need. I am a little bit concerned about the team formation, though, because I was watching a video from our good friend Hawker, actually. He's been doing a lot of great analysis around the major, and he was talking about how Vitality constantly exploited what Astralis were doing, and Vitality themselves have also sort of fallen on a bit of hard time, so they're very comparable in terms of where they stand as teams. So talking about like how like the A-holds on Mirage, for example, have been a little bit awkward. We saw a lot of missed opportunities on a map like Ancient, which Astralis pick into a lot. We're talking about a lot of basics in which the team formation just feels like it's a little bit off. So I feel like there might be something a bit deeper than just the likes of Zip, for example. Like, what are our thoughts on the Astralis sort of like formation? Because one of the things that always defined Astralis for me was the fact they were always better than the sum of their parts. Even during their era, right? They never had the most skilled AWP, that always went in simple. They never had the most skilled support player. That was always somebody else. But because of Glaive's leadership, it always brought it to the fold. And now it feels like, to me, that's not really the case anymore.
Yeah. It's like he's a bit outdated, isn't it? I mean, like, sure, Glaive is still, obviously, no doubt about it, a very good IGL. But over time, you have to evolve. And I feel like necessarily, while Glaive has evolved, it hasn't evolved past Blame F trading everyone and getting really good KDs, and Config having star performances which get them through the bigger games. I think there's no other factors other than that, like as you say, from the past, which Glaive, you know, incredibly, you know, led them to so much success. But they need more. They need something else. Like as you said, part of me thinks that you're absolutely right about Valda. I'm absolutely on board with that if you want to stay Danish, but also I don't think it can be enough. Like maybe if you get Valda and get Nico Dolls maybe from Copenhagen Flames to replace Farley to see if that changes anything. But I also feel like you need to give Farley more time, even though it's been quite a while. It's hard. It's tough.
I don't think Copenhagen Flames are necessarily willing to sell Nico Odos individually, just because of the fact that not only are they further along in this tournament than what Astralis are, but you also think about how the previous sort of talk was that they wanted to sell the whole team as a package, and the whole team wants to stay together as a big team. So it's a case of not only Copenhagen Flames not willing to pawn off one of their own players, but also the idea that Nico Odos would want to stay with the team that he's with right now, and he's got no reason to leave to go to Astralis. I know that in Denmark, the whole Astralis name is like very respected and it's very honoured by a lot of Danish players, but personally I wouldn't be looking at that if I was any smart player 100%. In the Danish scene. Like it's not going to be likely that they go towards a full Danish sort of side. I mean, look, you're right about the whole Valde thing as well. Like, you know, those are definitely the two options you'd look towards as Astralis if you wanted to try form another Danish team, but I just don't think it's likely that it's going to happen, if I'm being honest.
No. I mean, there are rumours of Valda, you know, wanting to go to a different project and maybe IGL again, because like he was secondary calling, right, in OG, especially with Alexi. So yeah, I think even with Nexa too. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where he goes. I'm looking forward to seeing it, because he's sort of at that stage of his career now, Valda, right, where his next move needs to either be one that pays him well and sets him for life, basically, or one, if he wants true success, is his last chance for true success, I would say, at the top of the game.
I think on the Valde thing, I think he could go to Heroic. I think that would be a little bit more of a, you know, less of a risk, let's say, with how is it going to turn out. And you don't, I think that's the thing with Astralis. Like you have a few of these obvious things that stick out, like we're talking about individually and AWPing presence, but then you also, you don't know how, because obviously Zonic as well has got to be a massive part of the era, and he's not there anymore, right? So you kind of just have Glaive trying to work in a newer coach as well that's a little less experienced at this kind of level, and how to deal with a major and how to quickly turn things around when it's like, oh well, we've just been, you know, clapped by our old teammates, we need to figure this out fast, otherwise it's going to go south. And you know, I don't know that they're really in position to be doing that anymore. So I don't know. I think the fundamental issues, it does feel like there's a few of them. I definitely agree with what Travis is kind of saying, where it's sort of behind the times maybe, and trying to improve on the old system and get us back a little bit to where we were, with a few tweaks, with a few, you know, changes, when actually it probably needs a whole across the board revamp, and rework. And maybe even, you know, I don't know what Glaive would do if he's not in-game leading, but maybe let Blame F try his style a little bit more heavily, and see if they can make that work. Because that's one of the things for me as well. Definitely at this tournament it sticks out, but certainly since joining Astralis, config has been mega inconsistent. Now, I don't know whether that's kind of down to you know, injury and all that. I was definitely in the camp of like, oh, I don't know, man, he's like just got off the back of a pretty serious injury. Can he return? But also it could be just the fact that I think Blame F knew how to use him a little better when they were in complexity. So who knows? Maybe something as crazy as that, you know, get Glaive in a supportive role or something. I don't know.
I mean, that's the next hurdle, though. It's like Glaive's always, or as far as the global offensive is concerned, he's always been like and especially for Astralis, he's always been the IGL. So what would that role be? I mean, in terms of like numbers over the last 3 months, like you mentioned how config has definitely been a star in the past time. So if I actually just bring this up very quickly, you can sort of see how that takes hold, right? Because Blame and config have been the two highest ranked players of all of them when it comes to this team. So you definitely like barking up the right tree in that sort of sense for Blame and config. But again, it's that case of how do you reposition Glaive and how do you reposition ZipX if you reposition them at all. Again, there's a lot of conversations as whether we should end up cutting those two, but you also got to consider when the core of the players left to go to Vitality, Astralis re-signed those two for massive contracts and massive deals. So like there's that element of how easy is it to sort of break those deals to bring Astralis up to snuff. But there's a lot of what ifs and maybes about this lineup that you have to think about, and I'm not certain a lot of it is going to be a positive times for them. I will say this, that when it comes to future tournaments, I'm not going to bank on them as heavily as I did for the major, and I think we're kind of all in agreement on that side, right?
Yeah.
Just a little thought to everyone. Do you think Blame F could go elsewhere very soon? Obviously we mentioned Valda leaving OG. Like, do we think that that's in the realm of possibility? Do you think Blame F's already sick and tired? Kind of like Thomas with Coalesce, right? Whereas like 2 weeks in, he's like, yeah, no, I'm out of here. I'm going elsewhere. Do you think this is like the Blame F approach could be that he gets bought out by another team? I don't know. We'll see.
I think it depends, really, because, again, if you want to just exclusively focus on the Danish side of things, I think it depends on how Heroic and Copenhagen Flames do. Like, you know, whether we can fit into another Danish team like that in this Legend stage, and if they do all right, and if Copenhagen Flames still end up bottling shit online, then that could be an opportunity for where they could fit Blame F into that. NIP, obviously, the Danish takeover of that squad, that's another avenue. Again, it sort of depends on how well all three of these teams sort of do in this major. That's sort of the main three that I'm looking at for Blame if he wants to move on. But something tells me that's probably not going to happen again. Similar story with the whole contracts with ZipX and Glaive. So the bottom line here is that
committed.
The bottom line here is that we trusted Astralis, we never will again, and that's basically the end of their story and the end of their run. A shocker, a disappointment, I guess, although we are talking about very high standards for this team, so whether those expectations are fair, I guess we'll have to leave that for another topic. But right now, I do want to move on. Another common thread that we had in our pick'ems was the 0 and 3, in that we literally were split down the middle between Renegades and IHC, and in this particular case, it was Asia that reigned supreme. IHC managed to get the 2-0 over the Renegades in this one, to the absolute disappointment of Dweg, again, to BM. I have to say, I'm not shocked that this came through. I'm not shocked that Renegades went out 0-3 personally, because I feel like the Australian and oceanic scene has always sort of like been its own little bubble, and it's like very culturally similar. So to me, I always feel like when it comes to them not getting international opportunities, they regress further behind than Asia. And that's the reason why I picked Renegades to go 0-3, because I thought if they drew against a team like IHC, they would have some major problems. I mean, that's my whole read on this sort of thing. But I do know a couple of you picked IHC to be the 0-3 team, so I kind of wanted to sort of like set that up as a conversation topic as to how this whole thing played out. Anyone?
Yeah, I'll just say that I bottled it basically, because literally IHC, as I said earlier, that they beat Renegades in not just the RMR, but that was the main win, the RMR win where they beat them already. So for me not to pick Renegades 0-3 when IHC had already confirmed their win over them in the main qualifier for the very event we're playing, as I said, it's there's that subconscious portion in your mind when you do these pick'ems where C unknown team, pick them 0-3. C known team, I remember Renegades, they got some players I know. Don't pick them 0-3 because you have name value. But realistically, IHC were better every day of the week, and I bottled it by not picking them, picking Renegades 0-3. It was in the end, it was between. I actually was considering 9Z as well, and the thing is that they actually did go 0-3 too, because the way I saw 9Z play, or 9Z, we're British, we can whatever.
It's Z. It's Z.
Yeah, it's Z. The way they played in the NA RMR as well, like especially in that qualifier match, you could just tell how ridiculously nervy they were, and how it's obviously understandable, but I knew that would translate to the main event too, and I really had a strong feeling they would go 0-3. But again, lack of name value, I bottled it. I went IHC. Couldn't forgive myself if they IHC did in the end go 0-3. I should have picked Renegades. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. That's it.
I mean, the thing about Renegades, and this is something I learned from Dweg a moment ago, was actually they had gone through like role changes coming into the major, which is like very shocking to me. The idea that you would change a whole system prior to the biggest tournament of the year, and then the result would speak for itself. Like, I don't understand what the thinking for Renegades would be on that sort of front. I kind of want to pose this question to Retro and Trav, and more so to Retro, because Trav, you just mentioned that your thinking was down to name value, lesser the whole analysis sort of thing. But had you had known these issues were there for the Renegades coming into this tournament, would you have picked them as 0-3?
Absolutely. I'd have had it in a heartbeat to have them 0-3. And I think what Trav said is kind of true, is that, you've seen Renegades do little things here and there, and okay, sure, they made the major. And I was wondering, the time together, is that enough that they can go back and look at IHC? And I knew IHC had beaten Renegades in the past, but I was thinking, is this, even though they did lose, and obviously you're playing every game to win, is this part of the plan where they go back, they learn, they reconstruct, and they know most likely they're going to play IHC in 0-2? I think obviously there was the chance of them playing 9Z or whatever, but I mean, what are the chances really that that if you're to face off again, it goes just as bad as the first time? And although Renegades did put up a little bit of a fight, I think, yeah, I expected Renegades to put on a better performance, and obviously fair play to them. And I'm not annoyed that IHC didn't go 0-3. Obviously, it would have been nice to have an extra point, but I had my 5 anyway, more or less. So it was a bit annoying. But I think with the Renegade situation, I thought if we'd have just had a little more time just spent on maybe the anti-stratting, it looked very clear that they were playing their own game rather than into everyone else's. And so I was kind of like, is this the Renegades that I expected when I picked IHC to go 0-3? Probably not. And not to mention IHC in their 1-3 game, right? The game that they actually went out on, that was pretty close as well. So it was clear that those guys had done their prep, and for them, I think they deserve to go a little further. It would have been nice to see a little more Counter-Strike from them. But yeah, Renegade 0-3, I think, is the more sensible approach. But what Trav said is right, is that I saw IHC and I knew they'd lost, but I thought in a BO3 settlement in the 0-2, are they going to beat them again? I hope not. And so that's why I went IHC just for that.
That's the thing, right? Like, I gotta say, it was a bit squeaky bum time for me when I saw when I knew that I didn't get my 0-3, I was like, oh no, here we go. Like, it's actually going to be close. And then when I saw Astralis facing Liquid and I knew it was confirmed, I was like, oh god. But yeah, the main thing of that is, You're right, Jay. If I knew and recognized that Renegades had gone through all those different role changes and they're changing it for the major, that's just not going to work out. Like, not in a month of Sundays. I just don't think that's going to. I really don't think that's going to ever work, especially when you're playing on LAN. Against a team that has been trying very hard together for a very long time. Blitz and Score. These two guys have just put themselves on the map for the whole next year, basically. Their performances were that good. So, yeah.
I mean, look,
Whatever.
in that elimination match between IHC and Renegades, Blitz rather went plus 25. So, like, just such a ridiculous stat line in this series versus, like, the next highest player was plus 7. And that, of course, was Score. So you mentioned how good those guys were. My concern for in terms of putting them on the map for the next year is the fact that we don't get to see Asian teams and Oceanic teams in a lot of international tournaments. I do know that for Dallas, LFO are going as sort of like the Australasian representatives, but there is no real sort of like, there wasn't even an Asian sort of qualifier. I think it was all Oceania in that sense. So for IHC, like, what would be that next step?
Move to EU, maybe.
Yeah,
they can if they can find.
I mean, if they can just have a 3-month boot camp in EU while like some Pinnacle Cup invites possibly are available to go for, that's your chance. Yeah, exactly. That's your chance. Absolutely.
I mean, it definitely has been one of those things where a lot of teams have tried it in the past, and not just from Asia, but also I mentioned LFO. They were in EU for a little bit of time for their Pro League season. They also played in the Pinnacles and the Elises and whatever tournaments are going on. There was not 9Z, another South American team that came over. It might have been the old Imperial team, actually, that came over at the tail end of last year. So we've seen that a little bit from a lot of different squads. I feel like, however, that IHC are going to have a very difficult time if they manage to do that. It's a case of staying in Asia and defending your like solid spot versus coming to EU and taking that risk. And I kind of wanted, I guess now's the time to pose that question to you. If you were in the position of the IHC side, what would you choose? Like, let's go around the grid. Start with Retro. If you were IHC in that position, would you take the risk?
I think it's a risk that has to be taken. I'd say. I think simple answer, yeah. IHC need it.
Yeah, I'll say yes as well, purely down to the fact of if you're in that region, other than the major qualifier and getting a chance to get stickers every major, which of course is very good, and you can still do that anyway. I think you're probably still allowed to do that. You could just move back and qualify there. What other chances are you going to get? There's only 2 majors a year. You need to play more events. I know majors are huge and sticker money is huge, but you need to play more majors than that, or more events, than that, to continue your growth as a team and as an organization. So honestly, I'd say if you can do it, if it's financially feasible to do it, move to EU, try your hand, ply your trade in a couple of these events and just see how it goes. Absolutely do it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree as well, right? And it definitely, it's kind of regionally as well, where when we had a few more like before COVID, a lot more sort of international tournaments. NA is a great example of where some of their higher teams were keeping up, and they're maybe able to take that back and share it and whatnot. And obviously, we kind of had Valorant cut through the NA scene a little bit, but also I think the fact that they didn't play any international Counter-Strike for a good 18 months or whatever, or if it was, there was like 2 teams going, and that really harmed them because they fell out of the mold, in terms of where like the meta and stuff is, where even a tier 2 or a tier 3 EU team can still maybe get a scrim in or go and speak to and that kind of thing, like a top level team. So I feel in that same sort of vein, it'd be great for the Asian scene, Oceania, even, to come across and whatnot. And I've always thought like the Asian scene, I suppose this was part of the logic behind my 0-3 of Renegades. Tyler have definitely taught me in the past that, you shouldn't put the Asian team in the 0-3. But also I've always felt that they've had kind of a lot of like firepower and, great mechanical skill on some of their players, as we're kind of talking about here with Blitz and Score and stuff. But it's always been the sort of refining of that, as it were. And I feel that coming across to EU would maybe teach them how to still play the same, because there's a lot of teams that still play that sort of like, click head Counter-Strike kind of thing. But to a bit more of a structured standard, or they can drop back and be like, okay, we need to do an execute this round, or we need to do some kind of a fake. And that kind of tactical nuance sometimes is just absolutely missing from Asian teams, right? There's a bit of a meme around like BNE that
Yeah.
they weren't running any strats or whatever, but they even realized that when they needed to, or when they were struggling, or when they'd conditioned the team so well to expect super fast and, BS plays that they were pulling out all the time, they were still able to have like a pocket strat and things. And I think that is something, honestly, that like the Asian teams maybe don't even think about all that deeply.
So
I was gonna touch on that and saying that I feel like that whole region, Oceania, obviously the whole Asian region as well, the whole ecosystem is so limited there, right? The amount of events, the prize pools, and it feels like the move to EU, even if you don't do great, you're playing against the higher quality of teams. There's a bigger range of teams. There's a lot more to learn. There's a lot more events going on. And there's a lot more to do while in Europe. It doesn't matter where you go, whether you maybe look to a relog facility, whether you hire something, and maybe you take the BNE approach in getting a place to stay, kind of like a boot camp facility that isn't actually a facility. It's more of a house than anything. And you live together and whatever. The building blocks are very different in Europe than to any other country. NA is on the right path, I think, with the whole like FPL thing with Koi and everything. Like we're starting to see maybe them catch up a little bit to the Europe side of things, but everywhere else it's so underdeveloped in terms of the competitive space that we need something different. And I think for them right now, all the time that they're waiting for that to happen, the move to Europe has to be done.
Well, speaking of underdeveloped, North America, gentlemen.
Classic.
Nice. There's one team, and I'm glad Skriv was trying to talk his logic through on the IHC side, because I also want him to talk through his logic on picking complexity in a bit more detail. And whilst he does talk through his logic on picking, I'm just going to flash this up. I'm just going to flash this up so you can explain away with stats like this why you decided to say complexity go through the challenger stage.
Yeah. Okay, so I like to this is sort of what I touched on a little bit when we just went over the general pick'ems. I do like to put a little bit of like heart into some of my picks. I will say that I don't know. It's definitely probably like 10% logic and just 90% like hope, right? I like the team. I like Floppy. I like Fang's energy. Very, very close to getting Fang on for like an interview and stuff. So I've talked to him a little bit, and he seems like a good guy. And I really like the sort of mentality. We'll see where it goes, because those types of articles can be mean. But he obviously had that article where he's like he wants to be best player in the world. There's no stopping me kind of attitude, and I think that is very American, but also very much so the competitive mindset that you need to have. But on like on a real, would I have like you bet something substantial on them getting through? Probably not, right? Like I wouldn't put my house on it, kind of thing, as the saying goes. So yeah, if it was full logic, I probably wouldn't have put them in. But I think you have scope, although I very nearly missed out, right? But you do have a bit of scope on the pick'ems to have a bit of fun and you never know type thing. And they weren't miles away, so I certainly feel that there's some players with potential in there. There's some that make it a bit difficult. It's funny, Grim, as you can kind of see there, is maybe struggling a little bit here. Maybe it's just the way that the team works role-wise. The big one here, similar to sort of, you saw them on Astralis, is definitely Junior, and I think that 0 AWPing presence nearly is just kind of unacceptable. Like you can't win a team, you can't win a game like that. You know what I mean? Especially in today's landscape where the AWPer is so very important. So yeah, I think domestically they do pretty well. I think this is the annoying thing as like an NA fan or whatever. Domestically they do relatively well, and Junior even plays well. But it does seem like international Counter-Strike, they're maybe not as used to it, and also pressure seems to be a big thing behind some of these players.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, there's not much logic, to be honest. Like, you know what I mean?
That's the answer I was
like
looking for, Skriv.
I like Jason Lake. Jason Lake's a bit of a hero in the scene.
Look, I gotta level with you. Jason Lake definitely is one of my heroes in esports as well. I love that man. He's got such a great personality. My concern with complexity is though I don't think this team is good enough for the level that this team expects to play at. Like there was a Deserto video where Jason Lake took him through a tour of their like $25 million like gaming facility, and it's like you have all these resources and then you post up shit like this. It's like, you know, I if I'm Jason Lake right now, I'm doing the whole like juggernaut speech again on Twitter, because it's just like, how can you see this as being a positive result for them? I understand obviously the individual players are probably not that like cohesive and that composed to be a team that makes it to the legend stage, but it's like, if you're complexity from the organization standpoint, I have to ask the question, why are you fielding this lineup?
Biggest kick in the gut was that they were going to buy Copenhagen Flames at one point, weren't they? That was the rumor and the talk. And I mean, look who's through to the legend stage, and look who can barely scrape together a decent performance against some teams that you should be blasting past. So
I mean, that's more Copenhagen Flames' fault, the players per se, from what I understand behind the scenes. So I'm not certain whether or not it's good. I mean, it is a bit of a kick in the gut to complexity, but at least they can take a look at the situation and be like, well, we could have had better, but ultimately that wasn't an option for us in the grand scale of things. So this is kind of what we have to deal with. And what they have to deal with is probably not a lot of international success. Like you said at best, Skriv, it seems like that national and regional results and that regional performance doesn't translate over to the international stage. So I just have concerns that they're going to go to tournaments like Pro League, like, are they going to be in Dallas? I'm not certain. Whatever tournament that they're going to be. Dallas, so tournaments like Pro League, Dallas, whatever it is that they're going to qualify or be invited to, and then they're just going to bomb out every single time. Maybe they might take a couple of scalps here and there when it comes to qualifier teams, but obviously they went 1-3 in this Swiss stage. So they really didn't do that well at all.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, for me, I think Dallas especially, that's a big tournament for an organization like Complexity for obvious reasons.
They're based in Dallas.
Home tournament. Exactly, like literally home tournament. So I would say there kind of needs to be a, well, Junior, this is your last chance, especially in the case of Junior, because honestly, you can't underestimate how imperative an AWPer that can hit the 1 to 2 shots per round is, because that could easily just say Junior is like 10-15% better and has, you know, relatively decent performances against this level of opposition they need to have a good level against, because obviously really the only teams that he's really owning right now are sort of tier 2 like North America. That's really it. If he's at that level, that takes so much pressure off of talents like Grim. Like, let's just put aside that, you know, Grim is underperforming maybe because of the roles that it's so different to Liquid, but like, if Junior's hitting shots, Grim has more of a chance to do what he can do. It doesn't feel like he's under so much, you know, high pressure to basically get 2 or 3 kills per round. Like, your AWPer dies early round and you feel like you have to go above and beyond to bring the round back into your team's favor, don't you? And that just keeps escalating over time. And Junior he's not hitting the difficult shots. He's not necessarily hitting the easy shots either, that, you know, players like, no, OC's been missing some shots too on Liquid, but he's hitting at least 50% more of the easy ones than Junior was / is. So yeah, I don't want to, you know, bash on Junior too much, because I'm sure, you know, he's a very nice guy. I mean, there was that unfortunate HLTV article, of course, that came out of his interview saying, I think we're the best team in North America right now. I think we're 50-50 with Liquid. That's a hard one to read back on now, isn't it?
Yeah, considering that Liquid are through and, well, Complexity and not. So, like, I mean, we could talk to death about Complexity and their whole, like, situation. I think that we could probably spend all day discussing that, but it's not probably very interesting to rag on North America, especially considering that I'm conscious for time, and also the fact that, you know, they have got at least one team through. So yeah, I still have to question it though, Skriv. I'm not sure you'll make that mistake again, considering how close you did get to losing out on that, but that's by the by. A team that quite a few of us had down on the pick'ems was Bad News Eagles. And I can sympathize with the idea that people might have actually had a faith in them on the basis of them being like the people's champions of this major, if you will, because like their whole story arc has been so entertaining, essentially. Like, they are the first team from Kosovo or Albania, whatever the nation it is that they register under. They're kind of like dual citizen on both. But like, they're the only sort of team from that region that actually have made it this far in a tournament. And for them, it's kind of a groundbreaking story for them, and I understand why people have picked into them. I personally didn't have a lot of faith that they do much. I still thought they were a good tier 2 team. I thought they were going to struggle in this tournament, and that ended up happening when you saw them go all the way down to the fifth round. I didn't know whether or not they'd make it past that final hurdle. I do know that, again, a couple of us did pick into the Bad News Eagles in the stage. I know that Retro, you decided on them, Skriv, you decided on them, and actually Trav had them down as 3-0. So for you guys, you definitely had a lot of faith in this one. Talk me through a few more details as to why you had a lot of faith in Bad News Eagles here.
Yeah, I think People's Champion definitely kind of fits into it. I think as well, run of form coming into it looked really, really solid. And then also it's one of these things you always, last time out it was Copenhagen Flames, and they were maybe and Entropic, to be fair, actually, where there's usually a team that slots in. Usually it's the CIS team, but usually there's a team that sort of slots in from the tier 2, tier 3 kind of level that, guys like us are used to. But your top level teams, maybe not so much, right? And they're not quite a team like a Renegades or an IHC or a Complexity that you can put away with minimal prep. Yeah, they fit into this weird sort of gray area where it's like, I really got to focus on, how G2 are going to approach things, how Liquid are going to approach things. So how Vitality, Astralis, and these big teams that are probably going to be a threat. And then you can kind of get away with some of the teams in this stage and minimal prep, like your IHC and Renegades, like I just mentioned. And then there's a couple teams that fit like into the middle where it's like you still have to prep for them, but you maybe don't have as much time or respect or whatever to do so. And if you're not prepped for them, they're going to abuse that fact. And they play a brand of Counter-Strike that's very confusing, very frustrating as well. You've got to keep the mental. And I think that some of the better teams were able to keep the mental and be like, okay, let's kind of just keep guns up and prep for any kind of move. Nothing is safe. And then there were other teams, I think, that sort of fell into the trap of getting frustrated, trying to play them at their own game. And that didn't really work out. So really, really fun team for sure. I don't know how much further they make it here. Now it's going to be, because you have, like I say, you have this one stage of, you got the gotcha play of like, yeah, I don't care that we're in a 2v4. I'm going to peek into where I know there's 3 people, and then I'm going to spray 2 of you down because, 2 of you have just got your early prep nades out for when I go for a shoulder peek or whatever, and then you're just going to smoke the choke. But it's like, no, actually, I'm just going to wide swing into 3 of you, I don't think that that's going to continue working, but for this stage, they were definitely the team, I think, that a lot of people wanted to get the leg up on teams, and also could, because of the way that they just approach things with this carefree attitude, and also mechanically look really, really good. And then they do have, they have the fire under them as well, that no game is over until it's over. There's no checkout from BNE. They will keep coming at you with the exact same energy all game long.
Yeah, their passion is basically unrivaled, and maybe only the Brazilian teams have as much passion, it seems like, as they do. The screaming was ear curdling, wasn't it? I absolutely love that passion. And yeah, that brand of Counter-Strike that you say they play, I mean, that mostly comes from how often these guys have played FPL. I mean, like 3 or 4 of the players in the BNE team are known for being very good in FPL and very good in those sort of tier 2 teams, and that sort of pug attitude has really worked for them. They have refined it, of course, to get to this stage, but still. And yeah, the reason behind picking them, for me, 3-0, I know was a huge long shot. I don't mind using my 3-0 pick on a long shot, as we've discussed. But yeah, I mean, their first game was against Eternal Fire. That was very winnable. I know it was only 16-14. And as the draw went on, I sort of kept predicting them. I thought they'd lose to Forza. They did. They beat Imperial. Again, I thought they probably would win that. Then Ents would be an easy loss. And then by the time they get to the final matchup, it was MIBR. And sure, it was close. But that's not the 3 hardest teams to beat to get through, I would have said. And even then, looking back in the the past and the previous qualifications that they've done, they've beaten Tropic, they pushed NIP really, really close in the Blast Premier qualifier as well. I watched that match. That was unbelievably sort of tense to see how it was 1917 map 3, I think, in that Blast qualifier against NIP. And they'd also beaten very, very good on-form tier 2 teams like Skade, pretty comfortably. So I really had a good feeling for them, and it's not just the heartfelt dream that we all know they've been on, and as you say, sort of basically have the whole community behind them. They are the underdog. That sort of everyone loves an underdog. In the UK especially, I feel like especially over in Wimbledon and football over the years, we're always the underdog with our players, and then when they finally win, it's like a huge, lovely feeling. But that's why we sort of adopted these as our underdog, and I had faith in them because of their previous results, especially the NIP one.
Well, for me, I was sort of looking at them, and I'm glad you brought the comparison of Eternal Fire in there as well, because I was taking a look at both these teams and I'm thinking, which of the tier 2 squads would I favour the most in this context? And I had Eternal Fire down on my picks because I thought that the resume was just far better from them. They have that little bit extra experience, and as we've discussed a little bit earlier on with the Forza and Imperial result, experience goes a long way. But Eternal Fire didn't make it through, BNE did. So what was that big difference maker that gave BNE the edge, if you will, to go further than that team, and of course to beat out as many teams as they did?
Just for me, I'll Retro, I'll drop it over to you after this, but I'm just going to give it a quick one. Voxic IGLing on Eternal Fire, not as experienced as the BNE players, as the BNE IGL. Go ahead, Retro.
I was going to say that for me, I feel like the Astralis talk kind of works the same for the Eternal Fire lads. I think that when you look at the roster, sure, you have some really good pieces to this puzzle, right? The Turkish side has never been a side that has failed to perform on an individual level. We have Xfloud, who played at 9, and he was, an unreal fragger, and he was just one of the better players we'd sent out of Turkey. And obviously, we have the onliners, so-called, of Xantares and Woxic, but we know what they're like at LAN as well. We saw the big stint with Xantares, and we've seen like so many things for me in a LAN environment that Eternal Fire can do well. But when you compare it to how they did here in the challenges, and if you look at the stats of this team, they really have disappointed, and it's horrible to see because I think that for Eternal Fire they have got the pieces, but as you can see, Xfloud doing his job as a rifler. You don't really have, as we said, the IGLing capabilities of some other teams in this tournament. And I mean, sure, the resume, I guess, in recent times kind of matches up, right? Where you see some really good performances in the tier 2 space. We have individuals that have come from backgrounds where we see them frag out, and Xantares and Woxic specifically are there. But the IGLing isn't there. The confusion for me seems to come with how Eternal Fire play. It seems like it's Furia, but with a little bit more of a, try to play a little bit more calculated. But for teams, they just read into that, right? And I think Eternal Fire, with the matchups that we saw and how they played as a team in general, they really disappointed me in this event. Getting a single win over Renegade. You didn't beat Bad News Eagles, admittedly a close game. But you're losing 2-0 to MIBR. You've really got to go back and have a think about what's just happened here. Because for me, this is a team that has good pieces, just can't perform. And that's also why I had Bad News Eagles over them. It was between Bad News Eagles and Eternal Fire for me as the 8th pick. And I just thought in my head, if I'm honest with you, sure, everything checks out to be that Eternal Fire deserve that spot just as much as the Bad News Eagles heading into the minor, or so-called the challenger stage. Here, though, the performance has just been so lackluster. And for me, Bad News Eagles will always edge it just because, again, I feel like they've just got a little bit more spirit, a little bit more hope. And more importantly, I think that they actually are a very good team when it comes down to individual performance. I think when you look at those games individually, there were different names that you could bring up in different matchups, and that's something that Eternal Fire don't have. You always have to turn to Xantares and Woxic and Xflower and go kill people. But for Bad News Eagles, when you look at their stats, and okay, sure, maybe there are games in which, a particular player didn't frag out, but there wasn't a time where a single player didn't show up, and there was always someone there to collect heads when someone wasn't. And for me, Eternal Fire lacks the consistency with their 3rd, 4th, 5th player.
Yeah, consistency. Yeah.
Go on.
Sorry, Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask you then, I mean, because obviously you drew comparisons to the Astralis conversation we just had earlier about the IGLing situation, about the individuals not quite going as ham as you'd like them to be. I want to sort of carry on a similar sort of thread, right? Because we're talking about options for Astralis and what they could do to regain some prominence in the scene. For Eternal Fire, what do you think is the option for them? What do you think is that move or improvement or thing to work on that will give them that chance to try and go further in the next major or the next tournament, whatever that might be?
It's difficult because Eternal Fire will never not be a Turkish team, I think. It's safe to say that right now, I don't see a world in which they'll switch things up and go European, because to me, that wouldn't make sense for them. They are a Turkish team. But having said that, when you look at the list of players, right, that are playing in the Turkish space, who do you go to? Who do you actually turn to and go, okay, we want you to play? There's no one. These are like the 5 players that maybe you have left. Obviously, we had the 9 team, 4 of them moved to Valorant, right? And so when you look,
too.
yes, and when you look at this Turkish, I guess, space, the economy of Turkish players has been, we have 5 or 6. That's it. You really cannot go elsewhere. And so for Eternal Fire, the only choice is European, but they're never going to do that. And so we've got to hope that there is just going to be the best scout that we've ever seen in Counter-Strike history to find the next up-and-comer in Turkey from a very young age, snap him up, teach him, and put him in the server, and hope to God that he'll frag out. And I think the roster changes have to come in for Eternal Fire, but the problem is their hands are tied. They either go stick with Turkey, which is exactly what they're going to do, and they have no one, or they go the European route. I mean, I don't know what the money situation is looking like for Eternal Fire, but who do you go to even if you are in Europe for them? And who would you even, consider in that situation? It's so hard for them. I'd say a roster change has to happen, but it's never going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say a similar thing, right? Because the thing about Eternal Fire is that they've capitalized upon that Turkish market, which is extremely passionate about their CS, right? It's very, like, me and Doig were having this conversation about a month and a half ago about Imperial and their sort of like intelligence about picking up this Last Dance roster, because they're going to sell T-shirts and stickers, and they're going to make back so much money from whatever they're paying to those players. The same thing for Eternal Fire, because those fans are so passionate about this team that they are going to stick by them exclusively because they are a Turkish roster. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking a similar scenario. I don't think they'll make a change, and it might be a case that they're just stuck in the dungeons of tier 2 and doing all the online tournaments and doing well in those, going to a major LAN and then going out in one of the lower end positions. It feels like it's going to be a bit of a vicious cycle for Eternal Fire. I don't know how that will weigh down on the minds of players in the roster itself, because obviously, like, to players like Centaurus left real big rosters. Literally, Big Hat was his previous team. He left that to join this Eternal Fire squad, and it's like now Big are going to be further on in the major than where Eternal Fire are at. So, like, is that something that you think the players are going to be willing to deal with?
Go ahead, Skriv. You haven't.
Yeah, I don't know, because I definitely had the angle of, and you've sort of implied this a little bit. I think the org, is perfectly happy and they're very popular, and I don't know what the business and all that behind it, but they sort of came in and they get all these viewers and they, team's doing okay and all that. So I think, the org's pretty happy. I don't know, player wise, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, was it Sangal or was it these guys that kicked off with Issa for a short while? And then he just kind of,
I think, Issa was part of this Eternal Fire roster previously.
Yeah, I think so, right?
Let me fact check that. I continue your point.
Sure. But I still think that it applies even if not, kind of thing, where Woxix may be starting to get a little jaded because a taste of the top, as it were, and then it's just sort of the Cloud9 project and everything. It just seems to be going on a pretty harsh downward trajectory the past couple of years. I think Centaurus, I don't know. I think that he'll maybe have figured that he's hit his peak previously, and they had some pretty solid runs, but this kind of might be it. But he's still got to be happy. And just like, I think he's always been a player that's just happy playing Counter-Strike, playing his own game, playing well. And he's still kind of doing that. So, and it's a weird one. It's a weird one. I think if they're in a decent enough financial and being, compensated enough, then I feel like they would be happy. But I think they would have wanted, at the very least from this tournament, they would have wanted a little bit more out of it, right? And there were a lot of people. There were a fair number of people, especially those that have been around the scene for a long time and know, like, that these Turkish players on LAN famously have always turned the dial up. They really expected a bit more out of them, and maybe even to go through, and they just kind of, they look very flat. Like, I don't know. I didn't really when there's multiple games going on. I didn't tune in and zoom in and watch and be like, wow, this one's going to be really exciting. It was the second game that was on the other monitor, because there just wasn't as much going on with this team. It felt like. So I don't know. I don't know what the deal is there, but pretty flat and almost boring as well. The way that they were approaching the game.
Well, as we've gone through the negatives of it, I'll try and end off with Eternal Fire positives and some thoughts of the changes that Retro suggested. Firstly, I think they're going to consider this major a success because they've got stickers, and that's such a huge investment and a huge injection of money they're going to have for the future, especially for the organization, not just for the players. I think that is a huge success for them. I didn't think there was a part of me which didn't think they would even make the major to begin with. So the fact they got this far is not too bad at all for me. xFloud is performing very well. I think is actually a huge talent because if I'm not mistaken, in this Eternal Fire team, he plays poor roles. I think he's the B anchor on nearly all the maps, and he's quite often entries as well. So you don't necessarily expect him to have consistent numbers, and even just CT side B anchor, your job is done if you go 1-for-1 usually, right? So I think he's doing really well. That's a huge positive. Xantares can still kill people. It's absolutely, I don't think there's been much drop off from him at all. Sure, there's some inconsistencies, but that's what you get with your star riflers. Woxic, I think, as you say, might get a bit tired of IGLing, so that might be something they want to change. One thing which I would suggest to change, and of course I've got no idea whether this is something they'd ever consider, but the one main man from Space Soldiers, I think you might know where I'm going with this, Sangal, they moved a lot of their players to Valorant, right? That's why Sangal have their sort of mix EU team right now. Hardstyle went with all the team, like Major and stuff. Major? Do you want to bring Major back and get him IGLing? Do you want to bring Paz back as a star rifler? Get them back to Counter-Strike. These guys were great for me.
I feel like it's sort of taking steps backwards, though, because when you think about those guys and the big roster that they were always a part of was Space Soldiers, and back in the day, Space Soldiers were always that team that would, much like how Eternal Fire are doing right now, make it all the way up to the line. They'd go this far, and then when they try to step past the line, go to lands, do well at majors, it wouldn't quite work out that way. So I'm not sure it's an upgrade per se. It probably is more of a sideward step at best for me. And you also got to consider the drop-off in terms of how it's been since then and now. Obviously, they haven't been part of relevant Counter-Strike, those two players, in a fair while. So I'm not sure whether that really is, again, the right move. And I think, as Retro and the Skriv were keen to point out, there's not really a lot of options for Eternal Fire, and I don't know if they're going to be able... I think much like Space Soldiers, they're going to get up to the line, and that's as far as they can really go. And I think this major has highlighted that for me. I had a lot of hope, I had a lot of faith. I watched some of their earlier upsets in their careers, and I was hoping that would continue here, but that has not really happened. So, oh well, sucks at the end of the day, but it is what it is. And to be fair, I feel like the 8 teams that we got definitely could have beaten Eternal Fire on any given day. So that's the bottom line of that side of things. Anything else that we fancy addressing from challenges before we move to Legends? Anyone want to talk anything specific?
We can go for it, no? We can go to Legends, yeah.
Legends time.
Cool. Then let's start talking about the Legends stage as we go to the second half of the show, which will be the preview. And of course, being the pick and post show, I've asked everyone to submit their picks prior to this show. Retro and Trav, I believe, were telling me earlier before we went live that they might end up changing these. So details are subject to adjustments depending on how they feel about this situation. Although I have a feeling that not a lot of things are going to change given what we're about to talk about here on the show. So let's bring up the picks that we have. I'll start with myself once again. I went for 3-0 for Furia, 0-3 for Imperial, and then my 7 picks outside of that were FaZe, Na'Vi, G2, Vitality, Heroic, ENCE, and Cloud9. I'm going to quickly run through all of these, in fact, actually, because you will notice a couple of common trends, and we can go into those in a bit more detail as we move to the discussion side of things. So Retro went for FaZe 3-0 and Imperial 0-3, then Na'Vi, ENCE, Cloud9, Heroic, Copenhagen Flames, G2, and Vitality. Vitality. Trav went so far as to predict actually the end side to go down in 3-0 fashion, and Spirit to go out in 0-3. Then he went Na'Vi, G2, FaZe, Furia, Cloud9, Vitality, Heroic. Are you starting to see a pattern here, lads? Skriv, very similar story for him. FaZe also in 3-0, Spirit in 0-3, then Heroic, Cloud9, Furia, Na'Vi, Vitality, NIP, and G2. We have all put down FaZe, Vitality, G2, Na'Vi, Heroic, Furia, and Cloud9 to go through in some capacity, whether that be 3-0 or 0-3. And to be honest, I feel like that's fair enough. These guys are definitely the top-end teams in the major.
I did want to say one thing is that no matter how the Legend stage goes, the playoff stage is going to be hell to predict. I think obviously we're here to talk about the Legend stage, but on the topic of all of us having the same ideas on who's going to go through, you never ever know. Like last year, I think with the Stockholm major, it was kind of predictable, right? Who was going to win, who was going to come second. You know, I got my diamond coin. I was pretty happy with that. And I think a lot of people probably got the diamond coin for Stockholm. If I'm honest with you, I think you can be proud with the gold coin this year, because this major is incredibly hard to predict. I think when you look at the teams as well and how even everything's been, sure, FaZe had a really good time and Na'Vi have kind of dropped off, but there's no reason why Na'Vi can't come back. There's no reason why Cloud9, under the new banner, under a new name, a new opportunity, they have a bit of a spark in them and come back. And Ents have always been a consistent team. Copenhagen Flames, we know what they're like at LAN. G2 went 3-0 in their group. They looked unbelievable. Vitality as well have new hope. There's so much positive you can say about this stage. It's like I don't even know if my legends are going to be right. Never mind when I get to the champion stage and have to predict the top 8.
It's okay, man. It's all right. It's only a coin at the end of the day.
Yeah.
No, I want the diamond coin.
I think we all want the diamond, but you are right. Like, it's going to be such a difficult fucking stage to go through. I mean, like you mentioned how all these teams have various different aspects to them. Like, there's just so much to think about when it comes to the top 7, the top 8. Like, there's so many opportunities and possibilities. And when you consider what the first round draw looks like, let alone what the second, third, fourth, and fifth rounds might end up looking like, it is very difficult to play things out from here. So I don't begrudge anybody for getting a gold coin in this one. Although if you do manage to get a diamond coin, lads, and I will owe you a drink at the very least. So I did want to talk a little bit about the 0 and 3, however, because we did we were all sort of sitting on very similar lines. Myself and Retro, we went down Imperial's idea, and they'll be down 0 and 3. And Skriv and Trav, you guys went with Spirit to go down in 0 and 3. So I want to start off with that Spirit side of things. What do you think is going to be the problem for them? Why do you think they're going out so early?
I feel like they had a little bit of an easier run. I'm just sort of going back and having a look here. A little bit of an easier run than people expected. They start off against Imperial. They lost close to G2 actually, which is fair. Then they get Eternal Fire, and then they get Astralis, which on paper, should be a loss really, but obviously, as we've been talking about, Astralis vastly underperformed. So with the hindsight, I think that their run has not been the most challenging to get here, in all fairness, right? So I do feel that they've overperformed a little bit, and like I say, they come close in a best of 1, but they come close against G2, so maybe I'll eat the words, but I definitely think with the caliber of opponent that we've got lined up, it's going to be really, really difficult for them. And then I think I don't have the page up, but I think I did a little bit more metagaming this time around, and I was like, right, who's their first matchup going to be? Where does that lead them to, and that kind of thing. And they start off against Furia, so it's going to be a hard first match at the very least, and then I think immediately they'll find themselves in a pretty scary spot. And as well, we have this. It's very similar to Forza, where not a lot of experience for some of these guys, and still, for me, need to just prove a little bit more. I think that, it's nice for them to make it to Legends, but I don't think that they're going to be able to match up against this sort of caliber at the moment. You've only really, I think Chopper has a fair amount here. Dexter's never really performed against these top level teams. And then, the two new boys are really going to be struggling, I think.
Yeah. I'm on the same boat because, as I said, I picked Spirit 0-3 as well. For those reasons, and also I remember what they were like about a month or two ago online. They looked really, really rough around the edges. I mean, the one thing I will say is that I'm incredibly impressed with their improvement, and to see Chopper, Dexter, and Magix, again, this little group of 3 doing really well in this team. I'm actually really happy for them. But remembering back to that few months before, that improvement has been so fast. I feel like in this next stage against especially a team like Furia to begin with, that's sort of, quite literally trial by fire. I don't think I see much for them. What I will say is that I had BNE 03 first. I think that one is very likely. I know I'm not obviously for the hearts of all the fans out there, it's a shame. But BNE, they've achieved their goal. They've achieved their goal of 1, making the major, and they've achieved this huge goal of making it through the first challenger stage. I don't think they have any expectations whatsoever to make playoffs, not in a million years. I think that even there was an interview that came out, I think it was with Regon, was it? Where he said, listen, we've made it, we're happy, we can just play without pressure now and just have some fun. So I feel like they've achieved their goal. So for me, it was always going to be between B&E and Spirit. Spirit due to the matchups and the form, B&E due to the fact they're just, feeling completely comfortable with how they've done and they don't really care about going any further. So B&E will do their best for me. I think there's a chance they can sneak one map. I think if, for example, if it is, as we saw with Renegades versus IHC, if there's a chance that Spirit play, if Spirit do play B&E, I think B&E win that for me, just over past form as well. I know Spirit, as you say, the win against Astralis is really good, but Astralis just aren't Astralis anymore. That's just name value again that we've got in our brains. So, yeah, I don't want to put Spirit 03. I don't want to put B&E 03, and I don't want to put Imperial 03. It's a tough one. Some of my friends have even picked Liquid 03, but again, all those 4, sorry, they're just so... all of them can. That's what Retro says, how stressful it is now, because we've reached the stage where all of them can. Like the previous one, there were a few you felt like there were a few guarantees, but this stage, all of them can go 03. All of them can go 1-3. This group of 4. So, yeah, I mean, Retro, if you want to come in now, because I feel like you've got the same thinking.
I was going to say basically the same thing, is that as much as we can compliment, the 3-0 picks and the 7 teams to advance, I feel like there's an opportunity in which every single team gets obliterated. For me, Big have had a bit of a rise, so maybe you can't really talk about them going 0-3, but you can't escape how these matchups are going to go until you can't really predict how anything's going to go until we see the 4 teams in 0-2 and who plays who in those 0-2 matchups. And I think for me, Imperial and Spirit, similar page, but I sort of sat down to me and I thought, if Bad News Eagles play Imperial, I think Bad News Eagles are going to win. If Bad News Eagles play Spirit, I think Bad News Eagles will take it very close, but I think they will take it. And I think for that matter, Imperial, I don't think beat Bad News Eagles or Spirit. And so for me, that's the only reason why I put them there. I'd love to be proven wrong, and I'd love for them to go on a run like they did in the Challenger stage and get back through and fight their ground to prove that this whole Last Dance name is just a name and a gimmick rather than what they actually are capable of. But the problem is, at the top, it's so competitive. It is incredibly difficult for them to gain traction. And sure, they're good at Counter-Strike, and they've been at the #1 spot for a very long time in the past, but that's the past and not now. And I don't know how these guys are going to do, especially when, they could be playing FaZe, they could be playing Na'Vi, they could be, literally the best teams in the world that are playing here. Imperial are nowhere near on the same wavelength. So for me, that's the only reason why I've put them 0-3. And I think that's the same argument as to why we'd put Bad News Eagles or Spirit there as well. Just because the top is so competitive that the bottom sticks out like a sore thumb. But those in-house matchups at 0-2, we just don't know how it's going to shape up to be.
Yeah, it's wild as well because of the fact that we are also talking about best of 1 matches as well. So that just adds a whole other layer of unpredictability about this whole Swiss stage. So again, not begrudging anyone who fails to get the diamond coin this time around. But in terms of some of the names that we have picked out and some of the little intricacies, because I mentioned that we had our 7 solid teams that we're going to pick into going through our 2 solid squads that we were looking at to go out in 0-3. There are a couple of discrepancies here and there. Ents, for example, wasn't on everybody's sheet, but it was on the majority of people's sheet. Skriv, you decided not to pick into Ents for this pick'em stage. Tell me why. Why did they miss the mark for you?
Someone has to, I suppose. It might be one of the ones that changes, to be quite honest. I suppose if we're saying it out loud on stream, maybe now I'm not allowed anymore because it's immortalized on a VOD or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. It just kind of feels like the run of form is maybe coming to an end. I suppose this is where it will, prove to me whether it is indeed like not necessarily like a flash in the pan, but sort of, them finding a gap where there's all this sort of world stuff going on at the moment. Few teams, therefore, lacking a little bit, and just some like G2 still, figuring themselves out pre-major and whatnot, and Ents have sort of found a gap where they've got consistency, their pieces are working. Everybody's, on a pretty good level at the moment. Snappy seems to be just reading the game and all the other teams really, really well. So it'll answer that question of whether it is just kind of because of what's going on around them and they're getting a little lucky, or whether they actually do have the pieces to be a top 10, top 5 contender more regularly. And I don't know. I just think that they will hit a little bit of a brick wall, finding that extra level, because I think at the moment they're kind of at their extra level. Like they more at the minute need a bit more work, maybe logically two more changes to be a consistent team at this kind of level. In reality, they should be more like a top 15 every now and then. They get a series on a big team and maybe make it to like a top 4 and then check out of a tournament that doesn't have every single team attending, and whatnot. So I feel like when we get into the legend stage, the major, you got some of these teams who've had, more time to prep and whatnot, and probably have had their eyes on Ents. And I just think that they will probably take a series if they get a big, if they maybe get, one of your Imperials or something like that. That's definitely a team that they there's a handful of teams that they could beat, but I don't think that they do enough to make it through.
I sort of feel like they're still riding the coattails of their run so far this year. Like going so far as to go second in Pro League, for instance, is definitely like a big momentum boost. So I feel like any team that doesn't come prepared for Ents is probably making a massive mistake, especially in the context of a best of one, where it really is such a wild set of strats that can come through from either side. I do feel like Ents are going to be just about good enough for me personally, and I know that obviously Retro and Trav are also in agreement on that side of things, because you have to sort of take into consideration what we've seen so far this year in a team that goes second place in Pro League. That's got to count for something, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm actually slightly on board with Skriv here, because I feel like that's why I've picked Ents 3-0. They are my 3-0 pick. And the reason behind that is the fact that they've been so good just in general this year. I mean, just running through it, like their challenger stage was very, very solid. I mean, not many teams 16-6 outsiders, right? I know outsiders aren't what they once were, but that's a really good result. They 2-0'd BNE, they 16-7 9Z, and then obviously the Blast Showdown qualified before that as well. They beat Astralis, and Heroic, and Copenhagen Flames. And those are the two big wins that I sort of mean something to me. Sure, Ents play FaZe in the first match, and that's tough, but it's a best of one, so anything can happen. And that's the reason why I think, as Skriv says, there's a chance here that Ents actually don't qualify at all, which is why I've put Ents 3-0 and not as one of the not fill up a slot of my 7 teams to qualify, because I think Ents are that good. But with FaZe first, best of one is very possible to win that. So yeah, we'll have to see. Retro, you can come in now. Yeah,
I was gonna say there's a lot of if buts and maybes with this team, right? I feel like when we say Ents,
a lot of if buts and maybes with this stage, to be fair. But
yes, yeah, no, that is very true. There's a lot to comment on, right? And I think for me personally, I think, if I'm honest, maybe I'm smoking something. I don't know, taking something in during the night. I think Ents have got a lot of a bigger chance than maybe we're painting it out to be. I think that Ents at this point in time, as you said, second in Pro League has to mean something with how they've recently been doing. Okay, sure, they did drop a series to G2. Their opening matchup against FaZe, although I have FaZe 3-0, as Trav said, it's a BO1. They could very easily win that. And then Ents could very easily go and play the easier team with the system that we have. If they're playing FaZe, who are a top 2 team in the world right now, what's not to say that these guys just continue to prove their value and get the easier teams, and maybe in the 1-0 or 0-1 they face a Bad News Eagles or a Spirit or an Imperial, and then it becomes so much more doable for them to qualify in general. And so I think that's for me why I've put them in the advanced section. Obviously, Trav's strategy of just making sure that he gets 5 in the advanced bit is one that I think a lot of people do, and it's very understandable. But for me, I think that they have every opportunity to go through. And if they don't, then I'm going to look like an idiot. And I cannot wait for someone to hound me on Twitter about it. However, I think ENCE themselves will be gutted beyond belief if they don't qualify here. Because they have had an amazing 2022 so far. And if they don't make top 8 at the major, even after their stint at Pro League and even after all of the results that they've had, yeah, I don't see a run in which they don't qualify for the playoff stage. And it is very competitive, but if there was one team maybe that beats them, I mean, who does it even become? Who do they face in the 2-1, in the 2-2? Like, I don't know. Because it's the start, it's very easy to speculate. I try not to think too deeply about this, which is obviously friendly fire to the whole point of the show. But yeah, I think ENCE have a really good chance here. And as I said, my pick'ems might change, but I don't think I'm moving ENCE. I really don't. I think that they're going to make it to top 8.
Yeah, again, I respect the notion because, as you mentioned, their 2022 has just been so stylish. Like, it's been such a great year for them so far. Again, like, going so far as to make it that far in Pro League, like, you can't count that for absolutely nothing. Top 16 in Katowice isn't all that great, but then you consider their tier 2 tournaments where they haven't gone so far as to go out of the top 8, let alone the third, fourth, second places, third places, first places that they've been getting over the tournaments that they've been playing. So for them, it's a case of that tier 2 like bolster with a tier 1 run that definitely counts for something for me, that gives them that little edge over on the ENCE side. And I mean, I do love how impassioned you were to talk about ENCE in that sort of side of things, even though you said you didn't want to do that. I do want to sort of prod some more passion out of you, Retro, because you're the only one of us that picked Copenhagen Flames to go through in the Legends stage. So I understand that's probably one of the results that might end up changing in the next 16 hours or so. But give me some thoughts about that team. How do we see them going through?
It's Copenhagen Flames on land, man. And if there's anything that we've learned, is that you should never count Copenhagen Flames out. And Skriv, you're already looking like you're going to throw a mean lecture for saying that.
Let's try to finish this point, and then we'll have Skriv come in to give a counter.
I don't know, man. Copenhagen Flames online, don't get me wrong. If this was an online event, they wouldn't be there. They would not be there. And I'd be looking maybe at a curveball, like an Outsiders or an NIP to go through. Obviously, I don't have them either in my advance, just because I think NIP right now, it's too early in the cycle to say anything about them.
Plus one.
Copenhagen Flames, they have looked, sure, not amazing, but top 8 at a major, I think, is very doable for them. When you look at this team and you look at the individuals, I feel like this is very similar as to what I said about the Bad News Eagles side, is that they are a team that have very individualistic players, but they know how to play Counter-Strike as a team. Ever since that move in, right, to bring the young guns in, Zyphon, Roy, Hooksy, to rebuild the Yabby, Nikadoz remains of the old Copenhagen Flames, it's only Hooksy that has a negative rating since joining the team. And so over the 12 months that the players of Roy and Zyphon have been playing, Roy has held a 1.2 rating. And for me, online and LAN, considering how bad post-Stockholm they played as a team, you've got to account that for something, right? And when you look at the stats on an individual performance, if you want to say the LAN events of since they've been a team, right? They've had some seriously good results. A 2-0 over NIP, another 2-0 over NIP in the Katowice play-ins. They've had wins over FaZe, EG. They took G2 to double digits in the Stockholm major. Obviously, they did very well to come second place. They had a 2-1 win over Heroic in the last major. There are so many things with this team that's continued to surprise me in a LAN environment specifically that I think would be very silly to count them out, right? And if you want to isolate the last 6 months of their LAN performances, sure, there's not been many of them against the top 30 teams in the world, but they've had some fairly decent results, and I think that can go a long way. That's the only reason why I've got them there. I think, as I said, that might change, as you said as well. Copenhagen Flames might not be there when my pick'ems get locked in tomorrow morning. But I don't know, man. It's very difficult to predict the top 7 or the top 8 rather in the first place. But I think Copenhagen Flames will find a way there. I really do.
I don't know. I think you're taking a fair risk. You know, I think you're taking a fair risk because they had some momentum and they look kind of good. last major. And to be fair, I didn't know that I thought it would be sort of Entropic would be the team this time around, because they, like, Copenhagen Flames have not necessarily struggled, but when it comes to those sort of bigger matchups, like, an ECL playoffs or whatever in the tier 2 scene, or a Pinnacle Cup semi, or whatever, they have kind of fallen a bit flat. So yeah, I don't know. I can definitely give that post major drop off was probably down to the fact they're doing all these negotiations and it weighs on your mind and you got all this stuff and it doesn't work out, and so that's kind of fair, and I think they have kind of returned to form a little bit, but I don't know. I feel like making the playoff stage here in the major is just a bit of a bridge too far. Again, I think they'll be similar to an Ents where maybe they'll take a matchup or whatever. But then you also have your Ents in there or whatever as being a team that you're also kind of taking a risk on. So there's a little bit of defying the odds maybe too much. At the same time, I think the core logic, irregardless of team, but the core logic of this legend stage is stacked. You don't really know what's going to happen. You might have G2 might lose their first best of 3 to Imperial, or I don't know that they're playing their first best of 1. Sorry, but you know what I mean? A team might go down in a silly matchup and then that's just them ruined and they can't pick themselves back up. So definitely on that kind of wave, I can see that Copenhagen Flames, in all the madness, in all the sort of chaos that could happen, might make it through. Because we have a fair amount, Cloud9 recently picked up. Is that going to be a great swing? Is that going to give them the energy behind them that we want to see? Or is that not really going to change very much and they're still going to perform a little lackluster? We don't really know. There's a lot of question marks because we've just not seen the full, again, what with the world situation, we've not seen the full potential of some of these teams or what we know they're capable of for quite some time, actually. And it just sort of, unfortunately, in our competitive world, how long are we gonna draw out these kind of reasons? How long are we going to say, is it indeed, things that are happening in the world, or is the roster, or is it a combination of both? We can never really say for sure. So I think that this legend stage, although Copenhagen Flames might not be the team to do it, I actually think a team like fucking Imperial would be the ones to sort of through all the craziness.
Man, come on.
No, but you know what I mean? If it all falls apart and FaZe and Na'Vi and G2, these teams that we've kind of come to know as a bit more of a consistent element, I think the Imperial have more of the know-how, have more of
I'm
the,
sorry, no, I'm gonna stop you. I'm gonna stop you there, Skriv. No, I'm sorry, I can't agree with that.
I don't know what your drug deal is.
I personally would have Copenhagen Flames to fit that role for me, but just because because as Retro was saying, their post Stockholm results weren't all that great, but their 2022 series that they've had, and as you mentioned, on LAN matches that they've had, they've all been very, very solid stuff. I'm actually going to quickly bring up the stats for you so you can see how good that their 2022 has been. This has been the last 3 months. Their 2022 stats have been fantastic. They've had Roy, Nikoros, and Yabi all performing like absolute madmen. And then you consider what their results actually have been like, right? And you think about second places, third places, top fours, top 16 in Katowice is like the lowest result that they've had, and that's still Katowice on LAN. The RMR was the first place position for them, and that's obviously the reason why they're in Legends in the first place. So I don't discount what Retro's logic is. I just feel like when you consider, as Skriv said, the only reason why I didn't have the Copenhagen Flames in my pick'ems is that all of the teams that we have in this stage, it's such a stacked stage of the tournament that I feel like it's very difficult to sort of justify some of the lower level sort of teams to make it through. And Copenhagen Flames, I think, sort of fits in that border realm. So that's the reason why I sort of say that they're not going to make it through. But if you pick them, I don't blame you for that. I definitely don't think Imperial are going to be able to be the team that would usurp Copenhagen Flames. And I mean, I've got them down as 0-3, guys, just because I don't feel like that their run in the Challenger stage was as impressive as everybody makes it out to be. They did go through in round 5. They did smash Forza, to be fair, but they also got pushed quite far by IHC. So for them, I do feel like they're prime 0-3 material, and certainly more 0-3 material than the likes of Copenhagen Flames.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the 0-3 is that I feel like Imperial, with their experience, if they face a Spirit, have a chance of beating them in the
Yeah.
0-2 match, for example. So, I mean, you're just talking about, Copenhagen Flames as well. If I didn't pick Ents 3-0, I probably would consider putting Copenhagen Flames 3-0 as well, because like again, they're a team that can just beat everyone. Like they have previous of beating everyone, especially teams like Heroic, as we've said, and NIP as well. And yeah, Skriv, of course. If am I tripping, or are you the only one of us four to pick NIP? Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
That's an interesting one for me as well, because like I think with Copenhagen Flames and sort of NIP and Heroic, that group of three, they all have, especially Heroic and Copenhagen Flames for me, have the ability to go 3-0. I think Heroic might freeze again in the top 8.
Yeah.
If that once they get there, but I think they should make it through, or could make it through. As for NIP, right now, I'm not trusting them at all in any, not for me. I don't think Plopsky is good enough at the moment. I don't think Esatag on the AWP can be as impactful as he should be. They should have got Device in while they had a chance. They haven't yet. He's obviously just not in a state where he can perform. He feels like he can perform. So yeah, that's just the main reason why I didn't pick an IP for me.
I'm not certain what the situation is with Device at the moment, because there's been so many questions about when he's going to come back, how he's going to do when he comes back. And NIP had that honeymoon period after he left to go on his rest period, and somehow, some way, NIP managed to look like a better team even despite that. And obviously, and they've got Device, one of the best AWPers in the world at the moment, sort of like on leave, and still they're actually having a decent showing and having a decent sort of having a decent run essentially in their year so far. But it's like you do mention some of the individuals on this NIP roster, and it is quite unique to me because you mentioned Plopsky and how impressive that you thought he wasn't all that impressive, and definitely when you consider the numbers, they haven't exactly been mind-blowing. They have been okay. My real big concern is Esatag, honestly, because like he's the only player that's red at the moment, and you consider that Danish connection. I do feel like he's dropped off since Device had left the team. So for NIP, there are a lot of question marks around this squad, and that's the reason why I haven't picked them, because I'm not 100% sold that they could make it through to the champion stage.
No, and that's the thing for me as well. I mean, like, looking at those ratings there, I really only trust in Res, whereas on Copenhagen Flames, for example, I have quite a lot of trust, and they've sort of built up my trust in them in, Roy and Yabi. I mean, there was a game that I casted a couple of months ago, sure, online against not as good opposition, but it was a 15-0 half on I think CT Nuke, and Roy and Yabi, their roles are just absolutely perfect in the sense of, this is the first time I think I ever saw a half that was, I think they had 45 kills between them in 15 rounds, and they went 15-0 in that half. And that's like, you never see that. Like that was literally a one in a career half, I think, that I saw from those two. And that sort of level of performance, especially Yabi on his entries, which I feel like are just so consistent online and on LAN, even if they don't win games online, is the difference maker between, a Copenhagen Flames for me and a team like NIP, especially in NIP's current state.
To be fair, I'd say if Roy didn't tweet like a fucking idiot, it'd be one of my favorite players.
Come on, it's unique and funny, man. Come on.
I know, I get it, because it's like a brand. It is like a brand, and, as long as it's if I don't like it and if people like it, then it's working. You know what I mean? And like we get to it, I just got to throw it in there because it does. It does annoy me sometimes. It does annoy me sometimes.
I get it.
Other times I see them. Maybe I'm having a bad day or whatever, and I'm like, that's a little cute. It cheers me up a bit. But some days, most of the time, I'm a cynical bastard. So
fair play.
But yeah, I don't know. I guess I have to defend the NIP kind of angle. Ultimately, it fits into one of those slots, and it's one that probably will get changed. So that's one of the things that it's just sort of like, there's a lot of different teams that could go in that spot. It's not like they're one of my full send, definitely, I believe, and all that. But I don't know. I mean, like, it really does feel weird with this team. You don't really know what you're going to get from them. Sometimes they have some great performances, at least on the eye test, and sometimes they lose some silly kind of games. I think their issue is that they're definitely they're a bit of a gatekeeper team, same as Big in a sense, where it's like they do beat these teams that you expect them to win against, like in the RMR, you know, looking okay and whatnot, and obviously placing relatively well there. I think 3rd or 4th. But when it comes to some harder teams like a G2 or a FaZe, for example, would be, you know, the more consistent elements it looks like at the moment, then they really do kind of struggle. So I think if they make it through, it's going to be a battle, and it probably will be in that final round. But I don't know. I feel like they need some, you know, some good news sometime, right? That's about as far as I can really go with it, to be honest. Without, you know, in the same way that you guys have done, sort of breaking down where roles are at and where team looks a bit weird. And yeah, I think Brolin will carry them through to a couple. I will say that I think Brolin will carry them past a few best of ones. But when it comes to the BO3s, I think it'll be a challenge.
Agreed on that front. So that's sort of some of the teams that are on the border and lower ends of the perspective. I'm a little bit concerned for time, so I do want to talk about one sort of major thing. And obviously, we're going back to the big 7 that we all have down to make it through to the champion stage. That being, again, Vitality, FaZe, G2, Na'Vi, Heroic, Fury, and Cloud9. I want to get a quick sort of analysis from you. First of all, of that 7, who do you think is the most likely to not make it out of the Legend stage? And who do you think, as an early prediction, because I know some of you won't be on this show, and when we do it for the post-Legends and post-Champions, I want to know, who do you think of that 7 has the best chance to win the major? Retro.
Furia will not make it. I don't have Furia in my predictions. I'd like to say that. I think I'm the only one that doesn't. I don't believe that they're going to make it through to top 8. Who do I think is going to win the major? Do you know what? I'm going to say... It's difficult. It's very, very difficult. This very major here, I am going to side... FaZe. FaZe are going to win the major.
Ooh, yes.
It's difficult, he says, and then he picks like the most obvious.
I wouldn't say that's obvious at all. I wouldn't say that's obvious. Because I think there's every opportunity that Na'Vi could beat them. And I think there's every opportunity that Cloud9 or G2 or Vitality could beat them on a good day. So... It's really, really difficult, man. Really difficult. I put FaZe 3-0 in my predictions, and if I'm honest with you, with how they played, sort of overall, the close BO5 they had against G2 as well, that was a massive one. They still won it. They are, you know, right now looking like the best team in the world. Whether HLTV says that in a few weeks' time or not, post major, and whether the major speaks to it or not, I don't know. But FaZe in 2022 so far have looked too good, and for that reason, I'm just going to ride the train.
I mean, to be fair, I've got them winning the major as well, so I'll give it that. The team of that big 7 that I feel like has the biggest chance to drop out of the Legends stage, probably for me, has got to be Vitality, just because I'm not 100% sold on this roster yet, because I talked about this on stream before the major actually happened. My big concern for them is the fact that this is the move that they made to bring in the Danish players and Zonic was to essentially win championships, and so far the tournaments that they've had have not really done that, and they've not really looked like a team that have been world beaters yet. Whether that's a thing that comes down in the long term is yet to be seen, but for the here and now, I think that there's a chance that Vitality could completely capitulate in this tournament. I'm not certain it's going to happen. I still got them down to go through, but I do feel like that there's that outside chance that things could really not go well for them.
Yeah, I'm on board with that too. If I was to, answer your question on who would I pick that I'm most worried about, there's sort of 3 for me. But I would put Vitality probably at the head of that. I'm not too worried about Furia. That's why I respect the 3-0 Furia, Jay. I think honestly I'm quite confident in Furia. Furia really impressed me recently. As for Vitality, I'm worried they're going to regress into that form that they've shown with this particular roster, this mixed roster, like a month or 2 ago. They could easily not make it. Heroic could have land troubles again, but I do think they'll make top 8, then just fall apart in front of the crowd again, like they have done previously. I think that's not fall apart, but just not win in front of the crowd, I'd say. And the one thing that I'm actually going to sort of throw a little curveball in, and I'm not entirely sure about, is Cloud9, actually, because we haven't seen them play in a while. Again, they're a team which I'm confident will make top 8, in a sense of they'll make top 8, then probably lose in front of a crowd if they're up against a tough team who has big crowd backing and they're not the favourites. I'm sure Cloud9, obviously they're going to have a lot of supporters being Cloud9 as they are now, but I'm concerned that they might not show up, especially in what I consider to be as I'm just looking at it on my right now, honestly, I think the most stacked Legend stage I can remember ever when it comes to organization name, player names, and name value of all of them. There's a chance that they don't make it for me. Cloud9 curse.
Yeah, I do have some concerns with Cloud9 on LAN. Obviously, they were monsters during the online era. But when it came to the last major, especially when we saw them at Stockholm, when we saw them also in the V4 event after the fact, they really struggled when it came to in that LAN environment. I think they had an easy run during the Legend stage, and then when it came to the Champions, the level that they got pushed to at that time was probably not on the kind of position that we should have seen the Gambit squad at that sort of event. And then we take a look at their run during V4, and I got to be honest, having been at that event myself, I wasn't impressed with that grand final against Entropic. It should have been easy for them. They had them beat, and then of course had the near reverse sweep against Entropic, and Entropic almost took it back of their own right. So there are those LAN concerns for me for Cloud9. I do feel like they're starting to change that narrative though, like to a lesser extent, sort of. Again, they're still, if they can make a good run in like this tournament, then that would be okay, because they did have their they did have their showings at Katowice and at Pro League, but there wasn't really like anything that made me say, okay, this is going to be a team that will win the major as of right now. I do share those concerns though. Like I see that of all the teams that I could pick as like a second team to also add to my Vitality concern, Cloud9 probably would be up there as well.
Okay, yeah. Just to finish off my point as well, I'll give you the answer to your question. I'm going to be boring as well and say I think it's FaZe's time, just for me. I think Na'Vi, while I think it would be I think winning this major for Na'Vi would be honestly 10 times more impressive than their first major, like 100%. With the issue, well, obviously, everyone knows the real life issues they're going through right now. I mean, God bless Simple. Like, what must he be going through? Like, if he can put all that behind him and out of his mind and get Na'Vi a second major, I think that might cement him not just as the GOAT as player, but perhaps like full stop in CSGO or like ever, because that would be such a huge thing in the current landscape of the world for him to win the major. But I do think because of that, that's my main reason why I think it's Carrigan's time and he deserves one, and I think he gets it for me.
Skriv?
Okay, so we'll start the team to go out. I'd probably have to agree with Vitality. To be honest, like I'm not a big fan of the idea, even in terms of like, you know, just being like, right, we got Astralis not really working towards the end of the year, Vitality not really working towards, why don't we just, you know, like just put them together, guys, and like see what happens or whatever. You still got Masuta in this team as well, and I feel like that's a little bit criminal. So we'll see. They got Bubsky listed as the sub, so you know. But yeah, I'm just not a massive fan. I don't know that it's so weird because like they have great players and sort of individually or whatever. I am a fan of like Apex and Magisk, and you know Magisk is one of my favorite players for sure, and like I just don't like the idea of it, you know? So I've never really been the biggest fan of this squad as a concept. So I'm kind of hoping that they don't do so well. But I also kind of see that, like you were saying, Jay, they've not really hit a good level yet. And it's like, yeah, they make it through the challenger stage relatively, but it's like these caliber of players should be making it through the challenger stage pretty easily. It's more against their peers that in previous years they've been like dominating and on top of and all that they've really struggled against. So it's this point now where they have to start shutting us up and changing the narrative a little bit. In terms of the winner, I think we're all pretty firmly, it seems like, in agreement that it should be FaZe. There's a little bit of sort of like my head says FaZe and my heart's actually a little bit like towards G2. I think that they could come in and the ceiling for that team is definitely there. Struggled to hit. They had some weird COVID stuff going on, you know, when we wanted them to impress. And they've looked good so far, you know, so we'll touch wood kind of thing. And I think that we will see them. People aren't necessarily underestimating them, but they've just sort of become a known quantity of like, yeah, they'll do well, but they won't win. You know, everyone's like, yeah, they'll easily make top 4, but they won't win, right? They might even make the final, but they won't win. And I feel like this has got to be this has to be the time. Nico is playing some of the best Counter-Strike of his career, to be honest, right? It's not maybe like, I feel like numbers wise, maybe not, right? He's had some higher numbers and whatnot, but in terms of like the impact that it looks like he's having in these rounds and pulling them back and working with his cousin and all that, I feel like he is playing some of the, if not the best Counter-Strike of his career. So I think he's got to capitalize on that. And it's funny because it's the same thing for Carrigan, right? This is probably the last chance before Carrigan's, low numbers really start becoming a problem again. He's got such a great, like an unbelievably powerful team around him. And he has to capitalize on that. And I think he knows that. So Nico less so on a timer, but it definitely feels like Carrigan is on that timer. And I really hope we get the FaZe G2 like grand final, because I think that would just be amazing. Like I mean, such a finish for this year.
I mean, personally, I would like a combination of either FaZe, G2, or Na'Vi in the grand finals for me. Like, if I had to shrink our big 7 down to a big 3, that would have to be the avenue which I'd chase it up, because those, to me, seem like the most likely teams that would win this major. And we could dive deeper into the intricacies of how that would play out if it plays out that way. But we are out of time, guys. The show is kind of coming to a close now. We've discussed so many things, from the Challenger stage to the Legend stage, and what we think things are going to play out over the course of the next week or so. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining me, guys. Pleasure to have you on, especially on such short notice for some of you as well. So really do appreciate that. And I'm going to give you guys the floor to promote your shit, especially Retro, because I know you've got another stream coming up immediately after this. So just let again, clockwise around the table, let the people know what you got going on in your life.
Thank you, Imperial, for going 0-3 in the Legend stage. We really do appreciate that. If they don't, come to Brazil. I don't know.
Thorin won't.
Thorin won't be. Thorin definitely won't be. Yeah. Nah. Yeah. Thanks for having us on, Jay. I do appreciate it. And it's been good fun. It's been good fun.
Absolutely, Trav.
Yeah. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I was obviously quite short notice, but it means a lot to be involved in this. It's my first proper really pop-bill podcast thing with a couple of other people, so really fun. Really enjoyed it, and looking forward to doing some more. Twitter @TravCS. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. Always, mate. We've been friends for a while, so it's always good to get on, shoot the shit. I like a little bit of the, more laid back. You can maybe say what you're thinking, not entirely everything.
Not what's required for the broadcast per se.
Yeah, exactly. So it's nice. It's always nice. Skriv cast on everything for me. So appreciate it very much, and maybe catch you in the next one. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, well, listen, there will be a next one, because I'm gonna try and do these for every single day that we have off on the major. So that'll be on the 18th on the Wednesday. So I'll ask you guys again to come back if you can afford to do that. And we will be doing one immediately following the grand finals on the Sunday 22nd after the PGL major has concluded. So make sure you're following the Twitch channel and the YouTube channel for all that action, because I will be uploading the VODs. We'll be live streaming it from then on. But that is all the time we have for you here on the Pick and Post show. On behalf of myself, the EternalJay, and my panel guests that have joined me for today, we want to thank you so much for watching and for listening, and we'll see you back here on the 18th to recap the Legend stage of the major.